It's a kind of unsettling to think, right, that darkness isn't always like lurking in the shadows. It can be right there,
Mm.
walking among us, even hidden behind like the most ordinary smile.
It's true. And that's what makes today's topic, I think, so fascinating, but also really disturbing.
Yeah. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the chilling world of notorious serial killers.
Right. And for this deep dive, we've been looking at excerpts from Notorious Serial Killers. It's a collection of, glimpses into the minds and the methods of some seriously terrifying individuals.
Really terrifying.
And our goal today is to kind of unpack the grim realities behind these killers. Like, what was it that drove them? What were the things that made them who they were?
It's heavy stuff. I mean, we're trying to grasp like what exactly makes a serial killer.
Right.
I mean, is it this like just insatiable need, like hunger for power? Is it this like disturbing ability to just blend in and seem ordinary?
Yeah.
How do they choose their victims? And then even the term notorious, like it just carries so much weight when you're talking about people like Jack the Ripper, Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy.
Right.
These names, like they're etched in our collective, like fears.
Absolutely. And, under those names, those infamous names, there's a question that just continues to fascinate and honestly horrify.
Yeah.
Were these people destined to kill? Or were their experiences kind of the corrupting influence that twisted them into monsters?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it really is a descent into like a very, very dark part of human nature.
It is.
So I think we got to start with like the core of it, right? Like, what officially is a serial killer? It's a term we hear often, but like, what's the set definition, like the established definition?
So the FBI, they defined a serial killer as someone who has committed at least 3 murders.
Okay.
With, this is important, a significant cooling off period between each killing.
Okay.
So it's not about those like heat of the moment impulsive acts of violence. This points to a pattern. Yeah. A deliberate, a sequence, acts separated by a break. It suggests calculation, purpose, a drive it's very specific.
Yeah, that cooling off period. I mean, it adds this whole other layer of like unease to it, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It implies this like premeditation and control that honestly is really terrifying.
It is.
So I guess then that begs the question, like, what fuels this repeated violence? Like, what compels someone to kill and kill again?
So the motivations, they're complex.
Yeah.
And they're deeply disturbing.
Yeah.
I mean, for many, it's power.
Yeah.
Like that's a central driving force. The absolute control that you have over another person's life.
Yeah.
Like being able to make that decision, it's potent allure, but it's twisted.
Yeah.
For others, it's this pleasure, but like a twisted kind of pleasure.
Coming
from the act itself.
There.
From the suffering, that their victims endure.
Okay.
And then there are those who are operating under like delusional beliefs, absolutely convinced that what they're doing, that their actions are serving some warped personal mission.
So I guess then, are there like common psychological traits that are observed in these individuals? Personality characteristics that seem to come up over and over?
Yeah. Certain ones, pop up again and again. Psychopathy, that's a big one.
Right.
A profound lack of empathy, remorse, guilt. They don't have it. Yeah. These individuals often perceive others as objects, almost.
Okay.
Not people. So they're incapable of really connecting or understanding the feelings of their victims. And then narcissism, that's another one, that sense of grandiosity. They think they're superior, so that breeds entitlement. And that leads to a total disregard for the lives of others.
And then, there's that ongoing debate, right?
Yeah.
Of nature versus nurture. Like, are these tendencies something that people are born with? Or are they learned? Or are they shaped by experiences? Like, what does the source say about that? So it touches on this. And it seems to be this complex like interplay.
Yeah.
Some research that indicates that there might be neurological differences.
Okay.
Particularly in the brain regions that govern aggression and impulse control.
Yeah.
But adverse childhood experiences, abuse, neglect, being exposed to violence, those can be significant contributing factors.
Yeah.
So it creates this environment where these tendencies, they take root and they flourish. It's most likely a combo, pre-existing vulnerabilities and the environment.
The source also mentioned something called the McDonald triad.
Yes.
It sounds ominous.
Yeah.
What is that?
So the McDonald triad is it's a controversial theory that suggests there might be a link between 3 childhood behaviors and a heightened risk, a potential of later violent behavior, even the possibility of someone becoming a serial killer.
Well, yeah.
These 3 behaviors are bedwetting, like beyond a typical age.
Okay.
Cruelty towards animals.
Okay.
And fire setting. So those were kind of thought of as potential warning signs.
Right.
So like, and the source gives, examples like Dahmer and animal cruelty, Gacy's traumatic childhood, Bundy's just, a lack of emotion when he was younger.
So, yeah, for example, you have Dahmer.
Yeah.
His history of animal torture as a child, it aligns with this triad. Gacy's abuse, that doesn't directly fit into the triad itself, but that kind of trauma is often considered a significant factor in later violent behavior.
Yeah.
And Bundy, right, like his emotional detachment when he was younger, some might interpret that as a sign of some, psychological issues brewing beneath the surface. But, and this is really important, the McDonald triad is not a reliable predictor of violent behavior.
Okay.
A lot of children who show these traits don't go on to become violent offenders. It's just something that was observed, a correlation in some, but not all cases.
Yeah, that's a really important clarification, because I think it's easy to see something like that, like a triad like that, and think like, oh, okay, so if these things happen, then this outcome. It's not that simple.
Absolutely not. No, it's much more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the most unsettling points that the source raises, though, is how these individuals, how often they're able to just blend in.
Right.
They're not always the stereotypical like monster lurking in the shadows.
Absolutely not. The source really emphasizes that they often lead these outwardly normal lives.
Right.
They have jobs, they have relationships, they're part of communities. It's what makes it so shocking when the truth comes out. It really shows you how appearances can be deceiving.
Yeah, it's a huge reminder to not judge a book by its cover, as they say.
Exactly.
All right, so let's get into some of these notorious case studies that are in the source material. And I think we got to start with Jack the Ripper, right? I mean, even just the name itself evokes this feeling of dread.
It really does. And the setting itself, it's like something out of a nightmare. 1888, dark, foggy streets of Whitechapel in London.
It's literally like a horror movie.
It really is. You've got this unseen killer targeting prostitutes, the most vulnerable, and the mutilations, gruesome, a surgical precision. That led people to think that maybe it was a doctor, someone with medical knowledge.
And that mystery, right, of his identity, I mean, that's a huge part of why this case is still, so ingrained in our minds, isn't it? Never seen, never caught, never identified.
Exactly. And then you got the letters.
Right.
The taunting letters that were supposedly sent to the police, signed Jack the Ripper.
Right.
Amplifying the terror.
Yeah.
Solidifying the legend. And despite, over a century of investigation, countless theories, a disgruntled doctor, royal family, I mean, you name it, his true identity remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries.
It's incredible to me. All right, let's move on to Ted Bundy, who, the source really highlights his charm and his deceptive nature as like key parts in his crime.
Bundy's a disturbing case because he shattered that conventional image of a serial killer. I mean, he was handsome, he was intelligent, he was charismatic, and he used these traits to get the trust of his victims. He would often fake an injury or pretend to be, some kind of authority figure to lure these young women to secluded places.
Yeah. And then the scale of his crimes, it's mind-blowing, right? The source mentions at least 30 victims, but possibly more.
Right.
Across multiple states in the 1970s.
And even after he was caught, he escaped. Not once, but twice. I mean, the cunning, the audacity, it's really incredible. And what's even more unsettling is that he had no remorse, like none.
Right.
The chilling detachment, even when he was being interviewed. Sometimes he'd even smile when recounting his crimes.
It's hard to even fathom that.
It is. He was executed in 1989. I think that provided some sense of closure, but it's that chilling reminder. Someone so normal-looking, so seemingly normal, could be so dangerous. It's a warning, really.
Yeah. Then there's Jeffrey Dahmer.
Right.
Whose crimes took an even more grotesque and disturbing turn.
Yeah.
The Milwaukee Cannibal.
Dahmer's crimes, I mean, between 1978 and 1991, they were horrific. I mean, beyond just the murders, he was experimenting, dissecting, preserving body parts. Sure. Cannibalism. His obsession was control. And it led him to try to create these submissive, almost zombie-like victims.
It's hard to even listen to this. And then the discovery, the human remains in his apartment, the Polaroid pictures.
Oh, it's nightmarish.
It's absolutely nightmarish.
And, unlike some other killers, he confessed in detail.
Yeah.
Offered this chilling look into his mind. He was murdered by another inmate in 1994. I guess, a violent end to a depraved chapter.
Yeah. Let's move on to John Wayne Gacy. The contrast between his public image and his secret life is just, it's mind-boggling. Pogo the Clown.
Yeah, the community figure who was a brutal murderer. I mean, his double life, 1972 to 1978, it's disturbing. He was part of the community, ran a business. He was Pogo the Clown, entertaining children. But behind it all, he was raping and murdering young men and boys, burying their bodies in a mass grave.
Under his house.
Under his house.
Like, it's hard to even, process that. That's just, it's so disturbing. The source talks about how shocked his neighbors were, and really the whole world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it was a betrayal of trust, like the ultimate betrayal. Shows you how some killers they wear this mask. They're so good at hiding who they really are.
Yeah. He was convicted, executed in 1994, but that image, that killer clown image, it's become the symbol of hidden evil.
It has.
All right. Let's move on to the Zodiac Killer.
Okay.
Who is another case that's shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
And continues to really captivate and frustrate investigators.
The Zodiac Killer. He was operating in Northern California in the late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And he's really notable for the way he taunted law enforcement.
Right.
And the public. He would attack young couples, taxi drivers, use guns, knives. And then he sent letters to newspapers, cryptic messages, these bizarre symbols.
Yeah.
And to this day, nobody knows who he was.
It's incredible to me.
I know. It's amazing that, all this time later, and they managed to decipher some of the messages.
Right.
Which it adds to the whole mystique of it. But that lingering question, did he ever stop? That's the scary part.
Yeah. All right. Last case study I want to get to before we move on to another section is Ed Gein.
A butcher of Plainfield, whose crimes were so bizarre and actually inspired some of the most iconic horror films that have ever been made.
Green. It's truly a macabre story. I mean, in 1957, when they went to his farmhouse, isolated in Wisconsin, they found this horrifying world where he'd used human remains to make everyday objects.
Whoa.
Furniture made out of skin, decorations from bones, bowls made from skulls. He was also a grave robber. He was digging up bodies from cemeteries to get these materials.
This is what horror movies are made
I
back.
know. The source points out, Psycho, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Silence of the Lambs, all inspired by this guy.
It's chilling to realize that fiction, that those films, those fictional horrors were actually based on something real. Totally. He only confessed to 2 murders, but we don't really know how many he actually committed.
Yeah.
He ended up spending the rest of his life in a mental institution. but his name, it's synonymous with a very specific and unsettling kind of horror.
Yeah. All right. These case studies, I mean, we've only scratched the surface, but it paints a really disturbing picture. I think we need to kind of delve a little deeper into the psychological analysis here.
Okay.
And the source really emphasizes this critical role of a lack of empathy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that inability to feel guilt, remorse, sympathy, it's a defining characteristic of a lot of these killers.
Yeah.
They see other humans as objects.
Right.
To use and discard, like there's no consequence.
Yeah.
And as the source points out, individuals with psychopathic traits, they can be incredibly skilled at faking emotions.
Okay.
Like Ted Bundy was a master at this. So it's hard to tell who they really are.
Right.
And that's what makes them dangerous.
Yeah.
The ability to blend in, appear normal, while harboring these truly dark intentions.
Yeah. Another thing the source talks about is this thrill of control, this ultimate power over life and death.
Right. For a lot of serial killers, murder is the ultimate way to assert power.
Yeah.
They decide who lives and who dies.
Right.
We saw this with Gacy, right? Like his need to dominate his victims.
Yeah.
Dahmer wanting control even after death.
Yeah.
And the BTK killer, bind, torture, kill.
Right.
That name itself, it's about control and torment. It's not just about ending a life.
Right.
It's about having complete dominance over another human being.
Yeah. And then the source also talks about the childhoods of these individuals, which are often, incredibly troubled, and like that potential connection between early trauma and becoming a killer.
And again, it's important to stress that not everyone who experiences trauma goes on to become a killer.
Right.
But there is a correlation there.
Yeah.
The source mentions Ed Kemper. His abuse at the hands of his mother seemed to really fuel a lot of rage.
Yeah.
Gacy's abusive father.
Right.
They could have contributed to his rage.
Right.
Abuse, neglect, violence, these things can distort a mind, especially a young developing mind.
And I think this is where we should kind of circle back to the McDonald triad and think about it in the context of this psychological analysis.
Right. So that triad, the animal cruelty, fire setting, bedwetting.
Right.
It's been suggested that it could be an indicator, a potential indicator of future violence.
Right.
Dahmer, right.
Yeah.
We talked about his history of animal cruelty.
Yeah.
Which fits in with that. Fire setting wasn't really highlighted in the examples that we've talked about, but it's another element.
Yeah.
And then chronic bedwetting, that could be a sign of some underlying emotional distress. But again, not a definitive predictor, just something to consider.
Right.
A potential early sign, maybe.
And then there's this role of fantasy and obsession, which also seems to be a key factor in these crimes.
Absolutely. For a lot of serial killers, the murder, the act of murder, is like the culmination of these violent fantasies.
Yeah.
The source mentions Bundy. He talked about how his fantasies, they became more vivid, more compelling over time.
Yeah.
And that's what led him to act them out.
Okay.
And then you have the trophies that they take.
Right.
The compulsion to go back to the crime scenes.
Yeah.
It's all part of this obsession, this need to relive the experience.
Right.
The actual killing is just one part of a much larger and a much more disturbing internal world.
It's like, the tip of the iceberg. And I guess, lastly, this brings us back to that fundamental question, right?
Yeah.
Born or made?
Right.
Like, what does the psychological analysis tell us about where this behavior comes from?
It's most likely a combination of both. Inherent predispositions, those vulnerabilities that they might be born with, and then the environment, the experiences they have. The source notes that, like, brain scans have shown differences in the brains of people with psychopathic traits.
Oh, okay.
Particularly in the areas related to emotions and impulse control. And then you have frontal lobe abnormalities, which have been observed in some cases. But you just can't ignore the impact of environment.
Yep.
Abuse, trauma, neglect. It all plays a role.
Yeah. It's a really chilling picture of how things can converge to lead to these horrific outcomes. I want to shift gears a little bit here.
Okay.
And talk about the cultural impact of serial killers, because it's a paradox, right? Like this fascination that we have with these figures.
It is.
Yeah.
They inspire horror, but they also hold this grip on our imagination. And I think the rise of the true crime genre, in books, movies, podcasts, it really speaks to this. The source suggests that there are a few reasons for this.
Yeah.
Maybe it's this human need to understand what we don't understand, what we find incomprehensible. Yeah. Or maybe it's a way to confront our fears, but in a safe way.
Right.
Or maybe it's that desire for justice, that we want to see these people brought to justice. And then there's this morbid, it could happen to me.
Right.
That makes us curious about the details, the specifics.
But there's a dangerous side to that, right?
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, there's that risk of romanticizing these monsters.
Exactly. The source talks about the dangers of how they're portrayed in the media. This dark celebrity effect. Fictional portrayals, they're captivating, but they can glamorize these traits, like Hannibal Lecter,
right? Patrick
Bateman.
Yeah.
I mean, even in real life, you had Bundy and Ramirez. They were getting fan mail marriage proposals.
Oh God.
It's disturbing to think that people are romanticizing individuals who've committed these acts.
Yeah. And I think it's also worth noting that the source points out how these real life serial killers, how their characteristics, their behaviors have kind of in a way shaped some of the fictional villains that we all know.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, think about it. Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
Super intelligent cannibal.
Right.
That draws parallels to real figures like Guyon and Bully Trevino.
Yeah.
Norman Bates, isolated, obsessed with his mother.
Yeah.
Echoes of Guyon there. And then you've got Patrick Bateman, cold, calculating.
Yeah.
Very psychopathic.
Yeah.
And even the Joker, right?
Right.
Chaotic.
Yeah.
No empathy. You see those elements in real-world criminals.
So this kind of blurring of the lines then between like documented reality and fiction.
Yeah.
It's both compelling and kind of disturbing.
It is. Because
it makes you wonder, are we somehow glorifying evil by being so fascinated with it?
Right. It's a good question. And then you've got the internet. The source talks about the internet. I mean, think about it. Social media.
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Reddit.
Yeah.
Podcasts. There are all these avenues for discussing true crime.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, that's good. Amateur investigators can uncover stuff. But on the other hand, misinformation can spread.
Right.
You have these communities that are, glorifying these killers instead of focusing on the victims.
Right.
And then there's the risk of interfering with investigations.
Yeah. I think what you're getting at is that there's a sense of responsibility that comes with how we engage with this type of content online.
Oh, absolutely.
And we always have to remember the victims, like keep them at the forefront of our minds.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to this other aspect of this topic, which is so unsettling to me.
Okay.
Unsolved cases. The mysteries around the killers who just vanished.
Yeah.
The idea that they just disappeared, it really bothers me.
It's unsettling.
Yeah.
It is. It makes you wonder. Who were they? Why did they stop? Or did they stop? And with all the technology we have now, all the forensics, can we ever really identify them?
Yeah, it's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
The source kind of revisits the Zodiac killer in this context.
Right.
And really emphasizes that mystery of his identity, even though we've been investigating for decades.
Right.
But there's that potential for DNA breakthroughs.
Right.
Like what happened with the Golden State Killer.
Right.
And people are still trying to crack the codes, crack the ciphers.
Yeah.
And there have been suspects, right? Yeah. Like Arthur Lee Allen. But there's never been any real proof.
No.
So that question, is he alive? Or did he just stop? It's still there.
Right. And the source, it also points out some other unsolved cases, serial killers who just vanished.
Yeah. Like what?
Like the Long Island serial killer.
Yeah.
The bodies found on Gilgo Beach, mostly women, buried.
Yeah.
They think it was a single killer operating for a decade. And then they made an arrest in 2023 But there might be another killer out there still. And then you have the Highway of Tears in Canada, all those missing and murdered women, a lot of them indigenous. And it's unclear if it was one killer or multiple, and there's still no answers. And then the West Mesa Bone Collector,
right,
Albuquerque, New Mexico. They found the remains of all these women buried back in 2009.
Right.
They think it was a serial killer, early 2000s, but it's still unsolved.
So this kind of begs the question, right? I mean, are there more serial killers out there than we even know about?
It's possible. I mean, we have technology, we have surveillance, but they could be adapting.
Right.
Finding new ways to avoid being caught. And as long as these cases stay unsolved, they kind of have the last word.
Yeah. It's a really unsettling thought. I want to take a moment to go back and just summarize some of these most notorious serial killers that we've talked about, and really focus on the details that the source highlights, the things that make them so memorable, so infamous.
Okay, so we'll start with Jack the Ripper, right? The image of London, the fog, the precision of the murders, the letters, the taunting.
Yeah.
It's a mystery that just endures.
Yeah.
Then there's Bundy.
Yeah.
He's the embodiment of evil hiding in plain sight.
Right.
Charming. He escaped from prison twice.
Yeah.
He was manipulative right to the end. He showed us how deceptive people can be.
Right.
And that's had a huge impact on how we view these kinds of things. Then there's Dahmer.
Yeah.
He went beyond murder.
Yeah.
Cannibalism, experimentation. And it's so frustrating to think about those near misses.
Yeah.
Like the victim who escaped and then was brought back to him because of a misunderstanding. It highlights those failures that allowed him to keep going.
Yeah.
And then Gacy. Pogo the clown,
yeah.
The contrast, a normal life, but then this horror under his house, this graveyard.
Yeah.
He had no remorse. And even his last words were defiant. It's just a dark, unsettling legacy. And then we have the PTK killer.
Right.
He terrorized a community for decades.
Yeah.
And he got caught because of his own arrogance.
Right.
And, he's a church leader. It just shows you that these people can be anywhere.
Yeah. It's a really disturbing thought. So the source then, it asks this question.
Yeah.
What makes a serial killer notorious?
Right.